Tom, not sure where to go to start with. So I thought I would start with this, and then we'll talk about the healthcare issue today as well. So Marc Garneau, Liberal MP, was on today with Elias. The talk over Bill C-13, the fact that Emmanuel Lambropoulos is in trouble now in the French media for speaking up, the fact that Anthony Housefather raised a couple of objections in committee that were basically turned down. And the question was asked, okay, the Liberals introduced this bill. Now they're the ones trying to kill some of these amendments. And here's what Marc Garneau had to say. This is what he wants Canadians or Quebecers to realize.
Quebecers should know that the Conservatives and the NDP are now going to continue to support block motions to make amendments to C-13 that are going to go more and more in the direction of enshrining and strengthening the presence of Law 96 in a federal bill.
Okay. I guess it's okay to point fingers, Tom, but isn't it a bit ironic here that the Liberals are the one who introduced this new languages bill, and now they're pointing out that the opposition is causing a problem? Is that the pot calling the kettle black?
No, you've got a great analysis there. The problem is, of course, that the bill itself has not been very well handled in committee. The minister, Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, has had any number of problems in presenting it, defending it. The original version that was brought forward by Mélanie Joly. She had a firm grip on the dossier, and I don't think we would have been in so much trouble. What worries me the most about C-13 is what I see as being the potential loss of the right of the English-speaking community to control and manage its school boards, because essentially we're going to be decreeing, especially with these amendments, that there's only one official language minority in Canada, and that would be the French minority. If you look at Section 23 of the Canadian Constitution, it's not clear anymore to me that the Supreme Court decisions that say that the Acadian Francophone minority in Nova Scotia or the Franco-Saskatchewans, they have the right to control and manage their school boards. I'm not sure that continue to apply here in Quebec. That's at least one of the concerns that I've heard expressed, and I actually share that concern. With regard to Mr. Garneau and Mr. Housefather and Ms. Lambropoulos and others who have been representing their community, they're saying, look, there are things in 96, and Lambropoulos is in a lot of trouble because the journalists who have been going after her saying what she's saying is not true, but what she is in fact saying is what somebody told her, that they had lived with a doctor. The doctor had said, I'm not sure I'm allowed to treat in English with Bill 96. They're up in arms saying, well, there's nothing in Bill 96 that says that, but hold on. If you look at what Eric Maldoff has put on the table, and there's a group of 500 workers in the healthcare sector who have signed, they're calling themselves an alliance. They have signed a document that says, look, this could cause problems of interpretation. When are we allowed to use English or not? So I have no way of knowing whether Lambropoulos' anecdote is in fact true. I have no reason not to believe her, and it's exactly the type of error, perhaps, of communication and interpretation that shouldn't belong in a doctor's office. It belongs in a courtroom if it's going to have to be argued. But people who are coming to see a doctor, they don't want a language test. They just want health care.
Look, on the issue of, and I don't want to sort of belabor the point, on the Lambropoulos issue, isn't she being taken to task today? I see a La Presse story basically calling her a liar, Tom.
Well, there was a La Presse story today. There was a La Presse story yesterday, 2 La Presse stories today. So the same journalist came back on it, as you say, essentially calling her a liar. But that report confuses 2 completely different things. Whether or not 96 would in fact lead to that conclusion, or whether the event took place. So that journalist can't have an opinion as to whether or not what Lambropoulos is telling us by way of an anecdote actually took place. Yeah. But then there was more piling on by other journalists. But to get back to your initial point, which is an important one. So the Liberals brought this in. And all of a sudden, because they're in a minority situation, it is in fact true that the Conservatives and the NDP and the Bloc have been taking a bad bill and actually making it worse. But to get to your point, who's responsible for bringing in the very bad bill that is Bill 90? That was a good slip of the tongue. Bill C-13. Who brought it in the first place? Yeah. That is completely the Liberals' fault, and it should have been thought through much better than it is. And right now, it reminds me of the gun legislation that Trudeau had to withdraw last week. It was a dog's breakfast. Mm-hmm. It was horribly badly done. All the work in committee was a complete botch by Minister Mendicino, and here it's a complete botch by Petitpas-Taylor. But the problem is the Francophone minority outside Quebec wants almost all the stuff that's in this bill, so it's almost impossible for Trudeau to back away now.
Okay.
Good grief, huh?
I just hate that again, and we're going to move on. This is Quebec bashing
You can't
when
deny
it's really not Quebec bashing.
Well, because-
Well, it's nothing to do with Quebec bashing, but what it is it's a bill that's going to wind up affecting negatively the English-speaking community of Quebec. Again, after Bill 96, as if that wasn't enough, the second kick in the pants is going to come from Trudeau's Bill C-13.
Yeah, and to hear Marc Garneau talk about it, by the way, he's saying, wait, this is just the beginning. There will be more amendments to this bill.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be good.
And what they're doing is, and Garneau's completely right, they're taking a bill that was enacted with the notwithstanding clause to take away rights, and they're inserting it in Trudeau's Bill C-13, and Trudeau didn't see it coming.
I find the whole thing. I mean, and it's just the perception, and we're going to move on. But the idea here being, you can pick apart any individual anecdote. The bottom line is that there can be a perception in the healthcare system. People don't know if they're allowed to speak English to treat people.
And that point, I think, has been made extremely well by Eric Maladoff's analysis, and by all of these mostly francophone healthcare workers who are saying, "What are you even doing, giving us rules on this? It should have been clear a long time ago that this has no business in our workplace."
So speaking of the healthcare system, it happened. The premiers met with the prime minister today, had a lovely 2-hour presentation, evidently, Tom, in which they were told final offer on the table. It looks like about $200 billion, but in reality, that's only a quarter of it is new spending, about $46 billion. What's your take on this so far?
Well, that's it, but that's $46 billion over 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
With, decreasing value. And in Quebec's case, that means it's about 1/5 of that. So what's actually on the table for Quebec, that was hoping for something in the $5 billion range, it's $900 million. It's less than $1 billion. So Legault, I found very restrained. Even Danielle Smith of Alberta, nobody was rending their garments, but they were all saying it was grossly insufficient and it didn't meet at all what they had been promised. So my colleague Emmanuelle Latraverse, that I work with on French TV, said something interesting. She said, Trudeau always does the same thing. It's the opposite of what Chrétien used to do. Chrétien used to always put the expectations really low, and then he'd come in with just a little bit more than what people were expecting, and he'd come away smelling like roses. Trudeau always says, we've got they had people out there spinning for the past 2 days. We've got this $100 billion deal, and we've got this, and even today they're trying to spin $196 billion. It's all flim-flam. It's all malarkey. And so people start looking at the real numbers and they say, well, this is a snow job. It's not true. And instead of coming in with something decent, if there had been no expectations and Quebec had gotten almost $1 billion, they would have said, oh, that's welcome money. But right now, Legault's line, again, softly delivered, was this is completely insufficient.
But what I find fascinating about it, and watching the bits of the press conference as we've been on air, so, I'm piecing it together, Tom, so bear with me, but they all seem to be saying the same thing. It's insufficient, but it's a good start. We're on the right track. Why is everybody being so cordial?
By the way, I love that they say it's a good start when the Prime Minister said this is firm and final, there are no other offers.
I know.
Is that a start or an end?
Well, I think that it also gives an opening for the Conservatives to come back at it because, of course, the Conservatives have been playing very coy as to whether or not they agreed with any new spending on healthcare. And the Globe and Mail's Bob Fife and others have been after them to try to nail them down on an answer, and they wouldn't give an answer. So that's an opportunity now because the Conservatives, of course, if it had been too much, would have said, oh, more government spending. But now they get a chance to say, well, we're going to rethink the system because what have we got? We had the health minister federally over the weekend saying the system's broken. We had Justin Trudeau yesterday saying the system ain't working. To the untrained eye, that's pretty well the same thing. And so instead, of coming up with a robust series of proposals that everybody's worked on, it's a single meeting, 2 hours. Here's the offer, nothing to discuss, no second offer, final, and no appeal, and goodbye. And I'm holding my press conference in a few minutes from a hospital, and that's it.
And that's it. Question is that it? In fact, we shall see.
Man, no.
Yep.
Tom, thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good one.
Good to be with you.